Hello, I am Laura Meyer, founder and CEO of Envision Horizons, and I'm here today with Kate at the beautiful Cannes Lions Festival where we are celebrating creativity. And Kate is a very interesting guest because she is the director of Amazon's Brand Innovation Labs, which brings all forms of creativity as well as measurement. And I'm very excited to learn more with you today.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a blast.
You lead Amazon's Brand Innovation Labs, which to my understanding goes under the acronym BIL. Is that correct?
It does.
Okay, so Amazon loves acronyms. So
You
we're
can even
gonna
say Bill.
Bill.
You can just call it Bill. It becomes a friend.
I love it. So we're all about educating the audience here about all Amazon acronyms. So we will
Oh,
get
wow.
them in the loop on Bill here.
Okay, cool.
But tell me a little bit more about the mission of Bill and what really makes this division that you work within special.
Well, so our mission as written is to raise expectations of what advertising can be. And we get excited about that because Amazon obviously creates this enormous creative canvas where we can do things that a creative person wouldn't be able to do anywhere else. And I come from a creative agency background. I was in the agency world as a creative director for almost 20 years before I came to Amazon. So when I got here and saw the opportunity that creatives had to bring really big ideas to life across all of these unique places, from Alexa to even boxes and bags, and then obviously just like the massive digital landscape, I was like, I wish I had known how to navigate this. I wish I could have seen how to navigate this because I worked on a lot of CPG brands. So I think what makes us special is that we are both a creative team and a team of technologists who can build and prototype and make ideas real across Amazon very quickly. But we can also help kind of guide other creative people and other business leaders through that Amazon canvas in a way that I think is very unique and ultimately ownable for them. And there's just an enormous amount of white space still to be explored there. So
Yeah.
I think that's
Well, I think
exciting.
what's so special, right, is you can build a full storyboard from the digital to the hard physical ad products, whether it's the lockers or the boxes.
Yeah.
You have done some amazing campaigns. What have been some of your favorites?
So I would say they kind of fall into like two categories. One would be the things that are just like, how did you pull that off? That's just bonkers. And
Okay.
and the other would be more about like the way that the impact of a good creative idea can scale to so many people when you bring it to life on Amazon. Because I felt like in an agency environment, I could come up with a lot of creative ideas, but then you're totally dependent upon another agency in a lot of cases to come up with a media plan that's going to make it so real people interact with it and it drives meaningful impact for a brand. So on the first side, it's kind of an old example, but it's the one that we still use as like the prototypical like giant wild thing is one that we did for Jurassic World. Like it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but we put a life-size Tyrannosaurus Rex and stuck it inside of a gigantic Amazon box and delivered it to the Grove in Los Angeles. So, and there they had, the talent, Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard, the talent from the film were there for the unboxing of the T-Rex. And it was just this crazy, super interesting, I think, synergy between the way that people interact with Amazon and something that they just would never have expected to kind of come out of that box. So we still kind of refer to projects as like, it either is or isn't a dinosaur in a box.
Yeah.
That's like the prototypical giant thing that like,
Instead of the elephant in the room, it's the dinosaur in the box.
that
Okay.
sounds so, imagine like what's coming out, what is going to be in there. There was actually like there was an Alexa aspect to that campaign that was really fun where people could kind of guess what they thought was in the box because it was traveling along the highway on the back of an enormous truck for weeks. And so there was sort of an activation piece of it where
The PR moment
we think it's in
following.
the
That's
box.
very cool.
Exactly. And then, when to pull that all the way through, we then can sort of integrate with like a Fandango, for example, and allow customers to buy movie tickets straight off of Amazon. So we can kind of close the gap even on brands that don't sell an ASIN on Amazon, which I think is super special.
Yeah, I agree. Like the non-endemic opportunity of what Amazon has to offer is super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think that Amazon advertising is just for products that sell on the platform. But it sounds like, especially with the work that you and your team are doing, there's just endless opportunity no matter your business model. What are some other ways that you're seeing non-endemic brands really embrace the opportunities that Amazon advertising has to offer?
There's a lot of really good examples. Maybe I'll think about travel as one, because I think even if you think about yourself as a customer, if I think about myself as a customer, once I've booked a trip, a lot of times my first step is then to kind of go on Amazon and be like, what are the things that I need so that I make sure that I'm prepared when I get there? Um, we have worked with a couple of like large travel providers to integrate their booking API into the Amazon environment.
Wow.
So not only can you maybe watch like some premium content that's based in a location that you would love to visit. We did a really fun partnership with The Idea of You, a film that came out last year on Prime Video. And they go to Cannes at one point, they go to Coachella, they go to all these amazing locations. So we were able to kind of highlight that content and highlight the places that people were going in that content, and then let you explore the different types of villas. I'm picturing this gorgeous villa that they stay in the south of France. The campaign was for booking.com, and you could see that not only can you book hotels, you can also book villas and houses and yurts and like all these crazy kinds of places. And exploring that through Amazon content, but then doing it in an Amazon environment where in some cases your logged in state can actually make that process even faster than it would be on the site itself is super powerful. Another good example of this actually is some partnerships we've done in financial services with insurance providers. If you want to get a quote for insurance, like you normally have to fill in 58 fields. And you probably feel that around like field 35 where you're like, oh, maybe not right now, right? And you kind of want to drop. Because your logged in state allows you to jump over so many of those, we could do that in 5.
Wow.
So we've done partnerships like that with insurance companies where then they promote that through, a live sports activation or something like that, because they can really do the full funnel proposition, but do it on Amazon just because we can remove friction in a purchase for nearly anything at this point.
Well, and I think that's a really interesting call out because it's not just about using innovation and creativity for these big dinosaur in a box creative moments, but also the practicality of simplifying the checkout or the form submission process.
Mhm.
And again, how you can use Amazon, who really has perfected the checkout process for their own website,
For sure.
and applying that innovation to a business that is totally different. So, brand innovation labs, a lot of businesses really think of it for those with the big budgets, and it is.
Mhm.
How has the programming that Brand Innovation Labs or Bill has brought to Amazon, how has that benefited some of the more emerging brands or other brands on the platform?
Amazon is always sort of thinking about, how can a good idea scale so that everyone can feel the benefit of it? That's
Mhm.
always kind of like at the core of anything. It's at the core of the way that you evaluate an idea, which I think is also quite unique from a creative perspective. I never had to think about what scale would look like. You just kind of have to get something over the line once and hope that it does what it was asked to do in the first place. But here we have this opportunity because we have such a wide span of customers, like on the advertising side, right?
Mhm.
Like really big brands to sellers that are smaller. We have the opportunity to build something and experiment with a bigger brand who wants to be kind of like brave and maybe take a risk and not be exactly sure if it will do what they want it to do, but they're willing to experiment. We will build something for the first time with them, build a prototype with them. And then once we've experimented with a few different brands and done something a few times, and we start to sort of get our sense of what the best form of that thing is, we can work with the product teams inside of ads to make a scaled version of that thing. And it lets them kind of move a bit faster to integrate new features in. And those features are road tested, which is such a massive advantage. So we've built a couple of things inside of brand stores, for example, that any seller can use now that we experimented with and tested and perfected through the course of these maybe higher budget campaigns.
Yeah.
And so everyone can kind of get it. It's just a question of how long it takes for it to scale. That's like the natural trajectory of things at Amazon. So it's not wildly difficult to get it to scale once people see the value in it.
Well, what I think is amazing is you're driving innovation for the brands or the businesses, but also for Amazon as a whole in terms of what they can offer advertisers and customers and the overall experience.
I mean, that's our hope always.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to know, like, there's so many exciting things we could do with the technology across Amazon. It's hard to know where exactly to place your bets.
Yeah.
So I feel really lucky that we can be in a position to move quickly, experiment with things, get them into market, get them in customers' hands, and then like provide that data to product teams so that they can move confidently and not feel like they're placing a bet they don't know if it'll pay off.
Yeah, it's always nice to have proof of concept.
It is nice. And at this kind of scale, it's like, it's super, super cool.
And on the topic of proof of concept, how does your team collaborate with other organizations or other divisions within Amazon to also really track measurement? Like, how are you thinking through, hey, we tested this, did it work, did it not? What's really being incorporated into the overall process when doing some of these really big campaigns?
Well, so we operate inside of Amazon. Every team kind of has tenets.
Mhm.
And one of ours is that custom has to be held to the same standard as a standard product. Like, but what that means is that there's generally custom measurement. Or we have to sort of say, okay, you did lockers, and those lockers, let's say, had an augmented reality activation off of them. And then there was also, this is an experience that we did for a travel brand in Spain, actually, where you could explore, you could snap a QR code on lockers, on a bag from a fresh delivery, and explore in augmented reality, like in the space you were in, these beautiful landmarks that people kind of walk past every day and maybe don't pay attention to. And so if you just think about, like, what would the KPIs be for lockers? What would the KPIs be for bags? What are the KPIs for an augmented reality experience? And how do you actually weave that all together into a narrative that lets the brand say, it was worth it, it wasn't worth it, I would do this again, but I wouldn't do that again? It requires like storytelling. Like, it's not just like an Excel,
Right.
right? Like, you gotta like,
It's not a simple one metric fits all situation.
it's really not. And it almost never is for us.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the dinosaur in a box, for example. Like, how would you measure that? Right? Like,
Right. Impressions, PR, I don't know.
right, exactly. So that would be the start of it for sure. But then at some point you're down there looking at like ticket sales. But if you hold this piece of the dinosaur delivery and say, did that specific thing drive ticket sales? It's a narrative, and you have to kind of like weave it together in a custom way, in a lot of ways, the same way you have to weave the story together for the campaign.
Yeah.
So we hold ourselves to a very high standard to show like what worked and what didn't. And in a lot of cases, there's a KPI, and then there's the value of learning, right? Like, there's the value of like, we learned that when we do something that's maybe like more premium, or we like elevate the experience, we attract customers we didn't even know we could, right? So like, we do a lot of things where we see new to brand customers or untargeted segments, like in an end of campaign report, where they're like, we didn't even realize that like new parents might be a target for this. But as it turns out, there's an enormous overlap between like people shopping for premium watches and people shopping for car seats. I couldn't necessarily tell you why that's true, but
Yeah.
but that tells them something they couldn't have learned by just kind of business as usual, running standard media. And I feel like that then kind of kicks them off into another direction of like, maybe we have an opportunity to grow our business in ways we haven't thought about.
Yeah.
And you would never like set that as a KPI, but I think it's massively valuable. It's one of the more like kind of unsung heroes of Amazon campaign performance, in my opinion.
Well, with Amazon, there's so many interesting insights. I remember when I was an AE at Amazon, we discovered for one of our baby brands that targeting those who had bought coffee filters was actually a really high performing segment.
That makes sense.
Who's exhausted, but new parents.
Blowing through those coffee filters.
Pretty much.
Just diapers and coffee filters.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
Maybe that needs to be some type of collaboration.
Right? It like makes sense when you see it. But sometimes you need the data to like really open your eyes.
You got to go on that data journey to find out.
Yeah, totally.
So let's talk about the overall ecosystem. I mean, as you called out earlier, there's so many things that you can get involved with, whether it's Prime Video, whether it's Alexa. When you're storyboarding with brands, what does that process really look like? And how do you decide which ad platform or tool you're going to incorporate?
That's a good question. So for us, I mean, you've worked at Amazon, so you understand this. Like, everything is working backwards from the customer. And so for us, that's like the user, the shopper, whoever it is that the brand is trying to reach. We always sort of try to think from like, what is the opportunity with this customer, or what is the problem that this customer has today that we need to solve before we can do anything. And so the product, or like the platform where it ends up being, is generally like the last part of it. it always starts with some insight generally derived potentially from their interaction with an ad product. So that kind of feeds back in, right? So if we see like, oh, there's a particular brand that has their audience interacts a lot with Alexa, maybe more than the average customer, then we will have that in mind as like maybe audio is a good place to play and maybe that's a good place to catch them. But we also will look at like, what is the overall sentiment in customer reviews around a particular thing? And is there a topic that no matter what the brand decides to do, they're never going to get around the fact that like everybody thinks the product has too much packaging or something like that, right? Like, and when you make that very real for the brand, sometimes they come and they say, this is what we need you to do. And we can kind of go back and say, actually, I think this is what you should do instead. Like not tactically, but like strategically. We think that it would probably make more sense for you to, I mean, I'm just making this example up, but like if everyone's saying it's overly packaged, then can we think about how to emphasize the fact that the packaging is recyclable and that this is actually like maybe more eco-conscious than
or better protects the product.
Totally, right? So like, but you know, you can't leap over, like if the customer has a blocker in their mind, those reviews are essentially a social network.
Yes.
That is people helping each other buy the right thing. And that's so powerful. And so I feel you just can't ignore it. So we try to do a lot that's informed by either something the customer has told us or something that they've told us by the way that they interact with our product set. Mm-hmm. And I guess the other piece would be we try to think about where we can remove friction. So in the non-endemic categories, this is actually a huge focus for us because it's not so intuitive that a person would come to Amazon necessarily to make a travel purchase or to buy insurance or a car or something like that. But we see opportunities in the market to remove friction where there's just maybe it seems unnecessary and try to bring that into the Amazon environment where that's just the expectation is that there won't be any friction, that you'll get me to, like you said, the ultimate cart building experience, that it will be quick and easy. And so that's always where the conversation starts. And then it gets relatively addy. We're like, okay, so what are some ideas that would actually from maybe a messaging, conceptual and strategic perspective help make the most of this opportunity or kind of help customers get over this barrier? And then talk about what story do we want to tell on Amazon and then figure out where it's going to be. The travel example that I gave before, that really just started with them saying to us, we've found that people are, maybe they used to like read a lot of travel guides or, read a ton of blogs to figure out where to go. COVID created this behavior where they were shopping for destinations because they were like stuck watching TV shows and movies. And
we were cooped up.
I wish I was there. Yeah. Everybody was cooped up. I wish I was there. And you started building this like, kind of bucket list of places you're going to go when you could travel again. And that behavior remains.
I also built up a closet of things to wear when I could travel again.
Just online shopping in your sweats. Like, yes, that's going to be great.
I was pregnant during COVID. And I'm like, one day we'll fit back into this and we're just going to buy it.
Look at that. You're just like, this is my future life. I'm shopping for future.
We're manifesting it. Exactly.
Well, you know what? Look, here we are in the south of France in your beautiful green dress. Like it all came together.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's the way that came to life. It wasn't like, ooh, like, how can we be on Prime Video?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, well, this is the way that people are thinking about travels. How can we remove as much friction as possible between the inspiration and the action? What interactive video could help us do that? What like kind of re-messaging strategies that helps people see, oh, like they're watching this show. The show is about Italy. We have this whole campaign where you can kind of like shop the destinations that were inside of the spot or inside of the TV show. And then you're in an environment where you're kind of already like in that prepping mode and you can kind of get yourself together. And, or even if you want to just like make a meal that you saw on the show, it's just so easy to connect the inspiration to your being able to like have that in front of you. And I feel like that's such an important part of the ethos of Amazon, generally speaking, to just close the gap between something that something that a customer, an end customer wants to do or have, and like having that thing arrive on their doorstep or their table or, whatever.
Yeah. Or some subscription.
Yeah.
Of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. So the content's kind of a means to an end in that perspective, because I think that's the way the customer thinks about it.
Yeah. And so how long is that planning and orchestration period normally take before the grand release of a large campaign?
That there's so much variation. Like sometimes a brand will see something another brand did and they're like, we want to do something like that. So the timeline, if they kind of are like, we know exactly what we want to do and we just kind of need to figure out how to make it make sense for this brand. and this brand's customer base, it could be, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It could be pretty
Yeah,
short. Like
it's
we
really
can,
quick.
yeah. And it like depends on what we're making,
Mhm.
and if we're tied to production schedules for television shows or things. There's all the X factors that could come
Yes.
into play. But if we have control over a lot of the aspects, we can build things relatively quickly. Some of them, though, and I think actually this is the way the best things happen, is that we kind of sit down and have immersion sessions with brands just to kind of understand, like, especially like sometimes a non-endemic brand gets into the habit of having a conversation just about like retail health and making sure that they're optimizing their media. And that's all like important enough that that can just fully occupy the time. So we will sometimes try to sort of organize an immersion session, just give everybody permission to like just think about it in a different way. Just like,
Whiteboard it, throw it
yeah,
there.
like what,
Yeah.
what if we did this thing? What if we did that thing? Like think about how you could be differentiating yourself in your category if you stepped off that kind of track of having to like maintain and optimize, and you actually just did something that nobody else in your category is doing and let them like think a little bit bigger about it. And if we do it that way, it's not like there's even a campaign yet, it's just kind of like maybe rethink your strategy about like how we're partnering together. And we do this with creative agencies as well. Like we sit down with the creative agency of a brand because they are always trying to like create a new way for a brand to show up and maybe are less likely to be in that like optimize mindset and think about ideas when nobody feels like pressure to put something on the line. Do you know what I mean? But that plants a seed and everyone in that room ends up feeling like we're all kind of part owners in this. And like, how can we do something that's going to end up, putting us all on stage at Cannes together? And those are really super cool. And those take a long time. It's hard to even call it like an SLA or a project timeline because there's this long period of just like kind of dreaming stuff up together. And that might be, call it like 2 months. And then depending upon the way budget cycles fall, we could easily not get back together again for like 10 months.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're like, remember that idea we had in that room in like 2024? We're ready to go. And then we start.
And they want it yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. Then they're like, well, you've been working on it for 2 years, right? So you should be ready to go. And then, which we obviously, try to move at the pace of the business, but there's just so much variation.
Yeah. So one area that I'm always super interested in is everything coming full circle in advertising and media. And when a lot of brands think about advertising on Amazon, it's sponsored product, sponsored brand, DSP and AMC are becoming a lot more common in brands' media budgets. But I want to talk about audio.
Okay.
Because again, full circle, I grew up with my dad even doing radio ads for his hardware store in Michigan. And now you think of whether it's Alexa or even there could be audio eventually a part of AI and Rufus.
Sure.
I don't know if there is talk of ads yet with Rufus necessarily, but how are brands thinking of Wondery and podcasting, and how is that really playing a role within Amazon? Or I guess I should say Build Brand Innovation Labs and having that play a role in their Amazon advertising investment.
I don't know if you were at the port the other day when the Kelsey brothers were there talking about their Wondery podcast. So that podcast is so good. And it's, it's so fun and it's so authentic. And they talk about brands the way people talk about brands. I love that thing. I don't like that thing. I bought this thing and it was better than I expected. And so that is an opportunity that we're working with Wondery on now, just to kind of figure out like, this is a really very fired up fan base. They love to participate in the fun that's happening in that podcast. How can we allow brands to have the role in that they want to have, because they're getting name checked. They have really, that's an incredibly valuable IP. The podcasts that are rising to the top are super, super valuable IP. Like this is not small stuff. Like this is millions and millions of listeners, really big fans who respect the recommendations and the ideas that come from these hosts. So that's actually kind of something that we're starting to dig into more this year and into next year is thinking about that as like a core IP that you can build really interesting programs across the Amazon canvas with. It doesn't just have to be like movies and TVs and TV. Like personally love podcasts so much. It's such an intimate medium. If you listen to the same person over and over again, it starts to feel like they're a friend. It's a very different dynamic. So I would say like audio is going to play an even bigger role, like as that core piece, where you're like, I know these hosts, I kind of know the general story they're trying to tell. And I'm willing to kind of follow them on their journey to the other parts within Amazon where I can see the content. So I'm personally super bullish about Wondery for sure.
And what about Alexa? I mean, what are some of the cool activation brands can potentially think about when it involves Alexa and storytelling or even a more transaction driven or ROI driven campaign?
I think so. The place where we have leaned in a lot into Alexa is in that entertainment space where there's an IP and you might want to interact with that IP on a daily basis and have, some of the key features of Alexa delivered in the voice of that IP. So that's actually
Oh, that's
another
fun.
example. Yeah, that's actually another example of something that we kind of prototyped inside of campaigns. I'm trying to remember what the first Alexa theme we did was. It's called Alexa Themes, and you can kind of both visually and from an auditory perspective kind of have the voice of a character. I think it might have been Super Mario. The voice of the character, it would just make it feel like kind of magical and fun. And then we did a really interesting Alexa theme for Wicked, where you can do a bit of a choose your own adventure through the audio experience if you want to hear what happens to what's Glinda's perspective on the journey, what's
Okay.
Elphaba's perspective on the journey. So that's probably entertainment has been like the most organic place for it to be
Mhm.
because people want to extend their fandom to these channels. And that I think is one of those kind of raising expectations pieces. It's like thinking about it more from like how can you really fan those fires of fandom?
Yeah, and make it
Like,
playful.
yes, yes, make it so that you feel like you're really getting something out of it. That advertising can be a value exchange with the customer as opposed to like a tax that they have to pay.
Yeah.
And that is definitely the way that we kind of think about, especially when we're asking them to engage more deeply. Like there has to be something in it for them. It has to be like
Right.
surprising or useful or
Otherwise, it's
something a
not
little
going
bit
to be
more.
impactful. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just kind of like paused over the skip button. That's the moment that we'd really try to like prevent every time we build something. Like, would you be hovering over the skip button on this? Like if there was one.
Yes.
You know?
And then what's the future with Amazon's partnerships with NFL, NBA? I'd imagine that opens up some really fun opportunity for your team as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So that space is so nuanced and there's so much deep knowledge that you have to have about how to work with IP that massive and valuable. So they actually have a team of creative strategists inside of live sports who are really really close to the broadcast details and
Mm.
those people, and they will often build out the core of an experience that's tied to live sports because our expertise lies in kind of bringing things across the Amazon canvas. So if there's some like really great idea that's going to happen in a Thursday night football broadcast, we want to make sure that the brand who's doing that can either remessage or actually like connect that part of the activation to the rest of the canvas in the way that feels meaningful and cohesive and really holistic for the brand. So we partner with them to do those things. That you should meet Amy McDevitt. She's fantastic. She
Yeah.
runs that team. Yeah.
Well, I've always said, well, in the last few years, I predict the day that you'll be able to buy a Super Bowl ad through Amazon ads. I think it will
That's a
happen.
cool North Star.
I think
I think that's a really
that's a goal for my agency once it becomes available.
you want to be the first one to do it.
I will be first in line, absolutely.
That's awesome.
And then Twitch. So Twitch also fascinates me. I am not a gamer. Surprise. But I know that there's been some really cool activations with Twitch.
Mhm.
What have been some of your favorites that you've witnessed or been a part of?
Well, one thing about Twitch that I find really interesting is that so my daughter sort of started out. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She started out kind of more in the like gaming space and really liked that. But then they started having more music streamers and beauty streamers. And as she's gotten older, she's more into music and beauty than she was into games.
Okay.
So she's now like learning how to play guitar from people on Twitch and watching beauty influencers like
Are
do
there
do
Get Ready
different.
With Me on Twitch?
Yes, it's obviously known for gaming and it's
Yeah.
so like beloved by the gaming community. But there's actually people doing other stuff on there, which is super cool. But to your point about the activations, the thing that I think is so cool about Twitch, and there's a custom team that sort of builds activations within Twitch and partners directly with influencers to do custom streams and branded streams. I'll give you an example. So we did a campaign in the UK this year with Nissan, where they had this division within their company called the Possibilities Project. And they do this amazing work where they use all of their kind of mechanical engineering brain power to do things like build race cars that have kind of accommodations for a person to drive it if they can't use their legs, or they will use that technology to help make more effective prosthetics, like really super, super cool stuff. And they wanted to highlight that project in Prime Video. So we worked with them and we shot a series of episodes that sort of showed how Nissan helped this woman learn how to, be able to drive basically a Formula One race car that was operated with her arms.
Wow.
And yeah, super interesting. And then there are actually, to bring up another very specific subject that you wouldn't expect to be on Twitch, there are a lot of people on there who speak a lot about accessibility, gamers even, who talk about the way that they've modified their keyboards or the various pieces of equipment to play to accommodate whatever sort of problem that they may have with their hands or with their legs or vision. And so we worked with streamers on Twitch, and they met the people who were featured inside of this film, and they talked about the episodes and the stories that happened inside of this content series. And the passion of the chat is really like where you see Twitch shine, because the people in that chat were like so massively supportive. You saw the brand love for Nissan like grew right before your eyes, because you see that these people know, right? Like the people in the chat know that the brand partnerships are funding the streamer who they love. So the streamer, this is what they want to do, right? Like this is what they want to do for their job. They've connected with this audience in such a meaningful way. And so the relationship that the audience has with the brand, I've never seen that in any other channel of advertising.
Wow.
And so it's not like it's billions and billions of people, but there's really something to be said for like these moments where the brand love grows right before your eyes. The conversation is real. They have figured out how to be completely authentic with the people who they're streaming with. And I think that's just really hard to come by. It doesn't feel contrived. It feels entirely genuine. And they have the guidance that they need from the brand about the campaign and the things that they need to hit, but they only do it when they believe in it. And it translates to all categories, because everyone's got to eat. Everyone's got to like wash their hair. Even when it gets very like sales driven,
Mm-hmm.
it still feels really authentic.
Yeah.
I think Twitch is amazing.
And Bill
Mhm.
has gone global.
Yeah.
In my notes, it's 17 countries, correct?
17 countries? I think so. We have like people sitting in 13 countries.
Okay.
And then there's a international expansion part of ads where, because of what I mentioned before, where if the product set's not quite ready to do everything that a brand wants to do, sometimes Bill just kind of like, boop, like
Awesome. Hello.
like, we really need this and it's really important for this brand, so we got to figure out how to do it. And people just make things happen. Like, I think that's one of the like really cool things about Amazon is that people, the bias for action that's baked into the culture is just like, oh, there's no team here? Okay, I'll be it, right? Like, let me put another hat on.
We're going to borrow from this. Yeah.
Yeah, right? You just like make it happen. But we've recently kind of brought in LATAM, Brazil, Mexico, MENA into our organization just to sort of like get the knowledge sharing going and make sure that everybody sort of can be positively influenced by what each other are able to do, because the markets are quite different, or the countries are quite different.
Yeah. And so I guess that's my question then
Yeah.
is how is the process different, especially to your point, if maybe some of the ad products that are available in the US may not be available in Latin America.
Yeah.
How does that whole process work? And how do you make sure that it's also very relevant to the culture that you're operating in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I think it's so important to have
Local.
local teams. Yeah. I live in London, but I'm American and I worked in New York before. So now that I live in another country, like a country that isn't the US, I have such a greater appreciation for like the cultural nuances and why it's really important to have people on the ground who can have the right conversations with clients and then actually execute the right creative work. I think to your question around like, how do we approach like building these things out when the product set is so varied? So we've had some really interesting things happen where, like, for example, in Australia, Prime Video was there before retail. Like Prime Video was more sort of established. And So people perceive, I mean, imagine, right? Like imagine how a brand would perceive a publisher that started as Prime Video as opposed to a publisher that started with retail advertising or advertising, meant to drive e-com sales. You have a completely different conversation. People have come in the door through that, and they're not sure yet how to completely lean into the retail piece of it, which is like sort of fascinating because I come from like my first job at Amazon was running the endemic side of the business inside of the team that I run. So the retail conversation is very important. Like retail readiness is like
Key.
critical, table stakes. You can't skip that step, right? So if you've got people who are thinking you more as a content provider and then they're kind of going, oh, full funnel, that sounds cool. Like, let's try it. That's a totally different conversation. And it asks different things of our team. So our team has to be able to do these like big content driven activations. That's table stakes. And then sort of figure out how to bring interesting technology and experiment with things as the rest of the product set grows and is adopted. Whereas, in the US, like the business was obviously built up in a different way. It was kind of built in the other direction. We have a tendency to kind of function as like a creative stopgap to bring the biggest and best solution because everyone just wants to have what everybody has, right? And we obviously can't do all of that because the product set is massive and sophisticated. But it's been very interesting to see like countries like Mexico, countries like Brazil kind of come in and immediately want to go to like dinosaur in a box land.
Yeah.
That's where they want to go. They don't want to, build it little.
They're going big and
they
dramatic.
Go big. And I think that's great. Like we like love that. So we try to just lean into what the brands are open to doing and experimenting to see if the things that we've done in other places will work there, but never assuming that they will. Like, I think that's like so critical. Let countries experiment with their own sort of approaches as opposed to just being like, you'll all wait until we've figured it out in the US and then we'll like let you know.
Right.
Because it's
that turns people off.
And it's a bit slow. It doesn't take advantage of the fact that some of the smaller countries can just move fast. And why would we hold them back?
So we've talked about so many fun and exciting opportunities within Amazon advertising. So what type of businesses and brands get the pleasure to collaborate with Bill?
We work directly with brands that we've sort of partnered with other folks in ads to understand, would a big creative idea be an unlock for them to understand how all of the products can work together most effectively? Not everyone necessarily thinks about media platforms in that way, right? Like they might be like even different buyers are focused entirely on one thing, right? Like it focused on optimizing sponsored ads or focused on optimizing video. And so we try to find the places where the marketers are willing to try and be the first to do something. Not everyone's necessarily like super comfortable with that strategy. Yeah, right. So like you want that to be the marketing mindset. And then just kind of to understand, like, are they maybe set up organizationally to be able to do it? The full funnel proposition is very exciting, but if different people own purchase decisions on the advertising or agency side of different parts of the funnel, like everyone looks at it at a macro level and thinks it's cool, but they all actually can only play their piece in it. Right. So like we try to figure out where are we going to have the highest likelihood of success and where can we create examples that will sort of stand out as a lighthouse for the ads business so that anyone in any level of spend can see it and take an insight from it that they might be able to apply to their own approach. We really do try to share as much of our learnings from our campaigns as possible and make sure that the campaigns get visibility so that brands who won't work directly with us can like still benefit. Steal with reckless abandon, I would love nothing more than for agencies and for in-house creative teams to be able to start to execute these things on their own.
Yeah, it's called R&D, rip off and duplicate.
Never heard that before. Yeah, go for it. We're here to help and support however we can, but obviously there's just thousands of advertisers on Amazon, so we have to prioritize just like everybody in every business. But we really do think of ourselves as being a force multiplier for ads and trying to just provide those examples that set a good high bar and a high North Star for any brand to be inspired by.
Well, this was very inspiring. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thanks.
I think this is really insightful for our listeners to really think beyond just the classic sponsored product, sponsored display, DSP opportunities. And it sounds like Amazon is only going to get more creative and vast in their offerings. So thank you so much for educating us today.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Super good questions. Very fun.